This is the second in my video project series where I use some of the moon landing hoax accusers' own choice of videos and photos against their claims. This is a picture of Buzz Aldrin, and the hoax nuts feel they have found all sorts of anomalies, evidence of fakery. I think they like to pick on this picture because it has become famous, but there is no smoking gun here. Gerald White makes videos in which he tries to show errors that he or previous self-appointed investigators and Apollo skeptics have found. One of them is fall-off. This would be observed if a spotlight was used to light up the scene. His picture looks like it might indicate that. But that is not the NASA photo. This is. Apollo photos may vary in brightness or contrast from one place to another, but not that much. I believe the deception is deliberate. Anyway, that's as pointless as his altered photo, which shows one star in Earth orbit over almost 50 years of orbital missions. So what? These photographs are subject to exposure, lighting, and processing. They're especially sensitive to deliberate post-processing by people who wish to deceive others. It's not like we need this picture when there are hundreds of others which show no fall-off at all, and essentially none which do. And don't forget the many hours of videos, none of which show this fall-off effect. In fact, here's a rover video. I made that little oval to show the approximate size of that hill in the distance. 30 seconds at about 10 miles per hour. That's 440 feet. Cut it in half if you want to, but those hills in the background there have to be at least a half a mile away. And that hill hasn't changed size at all. The brightness of the ground hasn't changed either. Man, that's a big sound stage and an awful bright light. Hoax theorists also think they're good at analyzing shadows. They believe this picture, and essentially all others of Apollo astronauts, use secondary lighting, fill lighting. The reason he is fairly brightly lit on the shaded side is because of the bright lunar surface around him. All you have to do is look at where the shadows are to see that this fill light is all coming from below him. The upward-facing surfaces are shaded. Look at the sleeve. The wrinkles are all lit from the bottom. And this shadow is on the upper surface too. Look at the dark shadow made by the cuff above it. Everywhere you look, he is lit from the bottom. Most of the Apollo videos are relatively poor quality and high contrast, but some of them show astronauts partially lit on the shaded side, and there are no fill lights following them around. This photo of Aldrin coming down the ladder is also popular among hoax theorists. They don't understand that the sunlit surface of the moon is lighting him up. Again, we see shadows on the upper surfaces. If artificial lighting was being used, the shadow on the ground wouldn't be so dark and you'd be able to see his shadow in it. By the way, the reason the ground shadow is so dark is because it is at the same level as the surface around it, so it is not being lit by it. But back to the original photograph. Hoax nuts are very fond of finding errors in visor reflections. There are no errors here, but there is yet another disproof of their claims. These visors are curved, almost semi-spherical. They have the same effect as a fisheye lens. If we look around the edges, we are seeing far to the sides. Here we can see the flag on his shoulder, all the way to where it is sunlit. What we see reflected in the visor is at least 135 degrees of the field in front of him. Here we can see his arm at the bottom of the visor and even the top of that pack sticking out from his chest. In other words, we can see almost everything in front of him. Where is the spotlight or reflective panel for fill light? Oh, there it is. It's the ground, and even aided somewhat by the LEM and the very brightly lit Neil Armstrong. Remember, objects are much closer and brighter than they appear in this semi-reflective visor. Jera White has gone to considerable effort to use a black box and models to simulate photographic conditions on the moon. I think this was a good project. My only objection is that his camera is facing toward the bright sky, which affects the exposure in a way that would not have occurred on the moon. But in principle, I liked the demonstration. Some have complained that the reflective surface around the figure is blocked by the box. True, but the inside of the box isn't completely black either, so it might be a wash. As an approximation, I'm satisfied. If Jera had taken pictures from the side of the box, they would have had to be exposed longer, and this is more the way the astronaut would have appeared. It is important to note that since this picture is taken almost directly toward the sun, the surface is much brighter than it would be if taken from the side, like the Apollo photo was. This side is closer to the proper brightness comparison, although still more in line with the sun than this photo was. So I have to thank Jera for saving me the trouble of doing a similar demonstration. He has proven that the surrounding sunlit terrain, even asphalt, is bright enough to light up the astronaut. How much he is lit up becomes a matter of camera exposure. So, thank you, Jera. Thank you for proving conclusively that there is absolutely no reason to assume that the Apollo photographs were taken using any kind of secondary artificial lighting. In closing, it's sometimes useful to grant hypothetically the conspiracist premise and see what it implies. If this was faked on a big soundstage, it would mean that the producers, cameramen, actors, directors, and NASA expert consultants and supervisors would have collectively agreed on using secondary lighting for a nice effect when any 8th grader could have spotted the fraud. I know hoax believers think they're smarter than 40 years' worth of experts all over the world, none of whom agree with them. But please, do you really think that the top PhD physicists and engineers in the world would make that kind of mistake? I hope that one day all these hoax believer conspiracy theorists will put their egos aside long enough to realize the truth of whether we went to the moon or not.